Got it. I have an instinctive feeling that by pushing this switch that something outrageous may happen. Although at the same time I also notice my daughter Cheryl's scream run through my heart, like a sense of duty that makes me feel that I must push the switch. I slowly push the switch in. The entire school building shudders as if it were a giant ship. The entire elementary school building appears as if it has been swallowed by Cheryl's heart as she stands alone in the darkness. I understand that I must do something. To the courtyard. The darkness softly whispers to me. The clock tower looks to be about tall enough to reach the third floor of the school. At its base there is a small door about big enough for an adult to enter while bent down. The door solemnly opened. After opening, the door seems to beckon the one standing in front of it to enter with an irresistible mental energy. I cannot resist that power. As I enter, the door closes with a hopeless thunder. Inside the clock tower a physiologically loathsome stench hung in the air. However, the smile of my beloved daughter in my heart lessens my uneasiness and lets me forget my fear, if even for only a moment. Reassured, I place my foot on the ladder leading underground, with my greatest motive, called love. The inside finally became a small passage about large enough for an adult. I run. Trusting that I will see her smile ahead, I run forward, stomping on concrete stained with the smell of death. Once I climb the ladder at the end of the tunnel, there will be no going back. I mutter Cheryl's name one more time. The depressing sound of the door closing echoes throughout the courtyard. Where am I? A raw, warm breeze brushes past my cheeks. The view lets me know that this is like a completely different world from the school I was just in. Once I think, where am I? I descend the small stairs leading away from the clock tower and become even more convinced. An extremely religious-looking design has been drawn in the center of the courtyard. Within a large double circle a triangle has been placed, and within that a strange pattern that looks like hieroglyphics is drawn. I don't remember this being here before. I mutter. This is definitely the school I was just in. The placement of the trees, and the construction of the building. However, an overpowering feeling of nausea rises up throughout my body. A revolting, horrible smell, like that of the stench of cutting into rotten meat, thickly wafts throughout the air, and is nearly visible to the eye. I begin to run. I can no longer bear to stay in this spot. By the time I place my hand on the door that leads inside the school building, I no longer have the strength left to tell how long I was running. Maybe it was only for an instant. The school building has dramatically changed. Metal grated floors. Blood-covered walls. Corpse-like puppets hanging everywhere. It's like a nightmarish scene in which everything is isolated from the real world. In spite of that, I run. I am searching for Cheryl. The unpleasant metallic sounds of my footsteps resonate throughout the inside of the school. And then I open the door to the teacher's room. Perhaps the door is not installed correctly, as it took me several forceful tries to force it open. Once I enter the room I am shocked. This is. Desks are strewn about, and a raw, rotten stench rules the room. I call home, where no one should be. Telephone. Without knowing why, I dialed my home number, where no one should be. Maybe there is a chance that Cheryl has already returned home. With slight hope I onomatopoeia for ringing telephone. The phone is ringing. The mechanical electrical sound repeats over and over. Then all of a sudden it stopped. The voice of a man I do not know escapes from the receiver. Hello, who is this? From the receiver I hear a gasp. Ah. Click. The phone went dead. I stood bewildered for a bit with the receiver pressed against my ear. There is a man in my house, where no one should be. A man I don't know. I gently hang up the receiver and for a bit I am captivated by that blue telephone. Room. Jirariri, jirariri. Onomatopoeia for ringing telephone. My heart rapidly contracts. The mechanical bell sound echoes throughout the room. I nervously approach the telephone, and once again pick up the receiver. Daddy, help me. It's Cheryl. There is no mistaking it. I firmly press the receiver against my ear. Daddy, where are you? Cheryl. Is this Cheryl? At that moment Cheryl's voice is replaced with a busy signal. I knew it, I think. Cheryl is here. Being located in the residential area, many children probably come to this school. The interior of the elementary school is larger than I imagined. Including classrooms, there are a lot of rooms, so locating Cheryl will be extremely difficult. If Cheryl wasn't brought here by someone and instead came here of her own free will, then perhaps she might be in that one room. I spin around, run to the stairs at the end of the hall, and then sprint up them. I have come to the library and my eyes are drawn to the open book here. It was a dictionary of religious science. Page 1, close-up of the Dictionary of Religious Science. Depending on the region, each have the characteristic of having individual doctrines. From ancient times, the practice of offering a living sacrifice was the only way to avoid disaster. Page 2. Most believers are those who have chosen to renounce the world for the sake of their beliefs, while those believers who cannot yet give up their material possessions need to deepen their knowledge of the sacred texts. However, some believers have a tendency to strictly hide the fact that they are believers from others. Page 3. This is because they believed that if the fact that they are believers becomes known, then their effectiveness would become nothing. Even with black magic, which is thought to have vanished in present times, its magical spells are actively researched in such areas. Page 4. In that process, an altar set alight with a sacred flame and a symbolic seal were required. Then by summoning an evil being and bringing it to contact with a saint, a new existence is said to be able to be created. Page 5. In this case, the saint is not limited to a priest, as an inanimate object can also be used. Page 1, black. I become gripped with the sense that my actions have been controlled by someone this entire time. Coming to the library, seeing that specific page in the open book. Even whatever it is that I must do now, it is a decision that is out of my hands. Page 2. Everything that has happened has been in someone's hands. I have gradually come to understand this. Even still, I probably cannot determine my own course. Page 3. I accept the direction of the unseen one, to whom I must obey. In order to find Cheryl, there is no other alternative. Page 4. I now know where it is I need to go. Page 5. As I journey there, I walk firmly, stepping forward one step at a time. I descend a staircase from which uncomfortably warm air flows and find an elevator at its base that invites me to descend even further, as its doors slowly open. Page 6. Once I enter, its doors close, and in the next moment, with a rusty clunk sound, the elevator begins to descend at a high rate of speed. Just how far down is it going? All I can do is go with the flow. Page 7, sconce with animated fire column. Gradually the elevator and I are enveloped in hot humid air. The elevator stops, and I step off as its doors open. Beyond a short passage, a dazzling light emitted from a small room which has been waiting for my arrival. Page 8, split head, animated. In the center the fires of hell burned, and everything made it look like this room was meant for prayer. And then it was there. It slowly moved around the enormous sconce from which flames and ash rose. Page 9. The lizard looks to have suddenly mutated. Its outer shell is a mucous membrane type. It just stares at me, and with surprisingly comfortable speed, it looks for a chance to attack. I fired the gun at its large body. Page 1, split head, animated. Smoke and powder emit from my handgun. I am certain that I hit it. However, those armor-like scales more than fulfilled their purpose. Page 2. This isn't effective at all. This is no good, I need to make my bullets hit somewhere softer. Page 1, split head, animated. At that moment a part of my memory was suddenly awakened. In the teacher's room. Page 1, split head, animated. In the teacher's room. Page 2. The phone call I received. Cheryl's cries dance about in my memory. Page 3. That's right, I cannot let myself die here. Cheryl is waiting somewhere for me to rescue her. She is still alive. Page 4. I raised my head. Its hard scales shined in the light from the hellfires. It must have a weak point. If I can just hit that. Page 5. I stood my ground and waited for its attack. I let it draw as close as I could. Inside its mouth. If I can just fire blindly in there. Page 6, split head, mouth open. It had drawn close and then its mouth sprung open. It looked as if it were planning to swallow me whole. My fingers trembled at its size. Page 7. I can no longer hesitate. I aimed at the inside of its mouth and quickly pulled the trigger. Over and over, over and over, the sound of gunshots rang out from my weapon for as long as I had ammunition. Page 8. And then I lost consciousness. Page 1, boilers. When I came to, I found myself in the middle of a dark room. Where is this? I wondered to myself. Page 2. The monster from before has vanished. I heavily stood up and then waited motionless for a bit until my eyes came into focus. Somehow this looks to be the boiler room. It is oddly quiet. Page 3. Maybe I was dreaming? My very exhausted body seems to have also recovered somehow. The low hum of the boilers strangely calms my nerves. Page 4. And then I sense the presence of a person and I shift my gaze. Page 5, Alessa appears. There was a girl standing there. She was wearing dark blue clothing, and her light brown hair was neatly combed. Page 6. The girl was just staring right at me. Once I noticed her and began to step towards her, she completely disappeared, as if her body just dissolved into the air in the room. I was alone in the room again. Page 7, Alessa disappears. What was that? Page 8. After standing for a bit, I let out a long breath and then placed my hand on the door at the entrance. Page 9, school hallway, light. Sunlight is shining into the hall of the school building. As usual, the snow is still outside, but I am gripped with a strange feeling of relief, as if cancerous cells had just been removed from me. Page 10. Filled with relief, I slowly walk toward the exit of the school building. And then I learn that Cheryl is not here. From the loud sound of the church bells that seem to call out to me. Page 1, street, heavy fog. I begin to run toward the church on a road half covered in mud. Snow falls above my head, some of which freezes my hair as chilly air flows by. Page 2. When I reach the church, I push open the heavy door without hesitation. Movie. Dahlia turns in the church. Page 3, Dahlia in front of altar. A cross is mounted on the front wall. Long benches are lined up on both sides of a small walkway. It was as if time had stopped for this familiar style church. Page 4. In front of the altar, a sly-looking woman with cold eyes looks down at me with a eerie grin. As I walked up to her, stepping one step at a time, she gazed at me without blinking. She looked as if she had predicted that I would arrive. Page 5. Were you ringing that bell? The woman snorted with a humph. I've been expecting you. It was foretold by gyromancy. What are you talking about? Page 6. I knew you'd come. You want the girl, right? The girl? You're talking about Cheryl. My eyes grew wide. Page 7. I see everything. You know something? Tell me. Page 8. Stay back. The woman held the palm of her hand out at me and then lowered her chin. In a way that suggested, please calm down. Page 9. Nothing is to be gained by floundering about at random. You must follow the path. The path of the hermit, concealed by fluoros. Page 10. What are you talking about? I asked once more without hiding my bewilderment. Page 11. Here, the fluoros, a cage of peace. It can break through the walls of darkness, and counteract the wrath of the underworld. These will help you. Make haste to the hospital before it's too late. Page 12. The woman held up a strange object and then softly placed it on the desk on top of the altar. Wait. Don't go yet. Page 1, black. I will. Her story was unclear and I don't understand it. I cannot just carelessly believe her. Page 1, black. I thought that insane woman's behavior and the details of her story were questionable. Page 1, black. All that remains in the church is the reverberations of the sound of a door closing. I go after that woman. I am convinced that woman definitely knows some secret of some sort. However, the knob on the door that she went through will not turn at all. It must be locked from the other side. Page 2. Damn. Now I am the only one left in the church. Almost as if taken from a nightmare, this space has heat. This warmth, It feels like it is protecting me from something. That is the best way to describe the heat. Page 3. I move away from the door and begin walking to the altar that woman was at. The object that the woman was just holding has been placed there. Page 4. Fluoros and key on altar. The fluoros. That is certainly what that woman had called this. I try picking it up. And then I place it back on top of the desk right away. Page 5. It is power. The overwhelming power of the gods rests inside this four-sided object. It was a sensation like an electrical current passing into the palm of my hand, and then power moving throughout every nook and cranny in my body. Page 6. I pick it up once more. This time I calmly take it into my hand and then place it in my pocket. For some reason I am convinced that this object will help me find Cheryl. Page 7, black. I pick up the key that was next to the fluoros, open the door of the church, and rush out into the heatless snow world again. Page 8, street, heavy fog. Hospital? That woman certainly said something about one. Alchemilla Hospital. The only hospital I could find on the map was that one. I could see my breath as I exhaled while I headed toward the entertainment district. Page 9, Drawbridge Tower. The bridge to the entertainment district has been raised so that boats can pass by it in the river below. In other words, it is split in the middle, and is fixed in a raised position that makes it look like the Japanese katakana character. I enter the nearby drawbridge control room, place the key I was holding into the control panel, and forcefully turn it to the right. Page 10. While emitting a sound like an old woman laughing, the bridge finally begins to lower, inviting me to the entertainment district. Page 1, street corner, heavy fog. After crossing the bridge I shudder. The temperature is gradually declining. Or maybe it is just a result of the thing inside me that produces nervousness and fear. Page 2. On this wide road there is not a single motorcycle running. I am running right down the center of it. If I continue forward, Alchemilla Hospital should be on the right. Page 3, Hospital Gate. An old building appears in the thick fog. On the signboard Alchemilla appears in faded letters. Its eeriness caused me to hesitate for an instant, but in the next moment I placed my hand on the cold gate. Page 4. I open the heavy hospital gate, and then open the door directly to my right that has entrance written on it. Page 5, Hospital Reception Area. The inside of the hospital is wrapped in silence. To the left there is a reception area, in which various papers are neatly placed on a shelf. Waiting benches are lined up along the back of this hall, and a television is pointed at them. Page 6. I do not feel the presence of any patients, or even any people. Only faint light pours in through the windows from the cloudy sky. The hall is filled with a trace scent of alcohol, which penetrates my nose. Page 7. I begin walking. After passing through the waiting room I reach a long corridor. I open the door marked Examination Room. Page 8, Examination Room with Kaufman. At almost the exact same time as I opened the door, a man inside jumped up out of his chair. He is holding a handgun in his right hand. Immediately counter-attack with my gun. Added. Page 1, Examination Room with Kaufman. He lowers his gun. I instantly ready my gun. That plump man appeared to realize that I was a human, but as soon as he saw the gun his eyes grew wide. Page 2. Hold it. Stop. Don't shoot. Wait, I'm not here to fight. After I lowered my gun, the man sat down in his chair in a way that showed that he was relieved. Thank God. Another human being. Page 3. My name is Harry Mason. I'm in town on vacation. Do you work here? Page 4. The man nodded. I was truly relieved. Silent Hill, which has become a habitat for strange monsters. This is my first contact with someone from this town. Page 1, Examination Room with Kaufman. I'm Dr. Michael Kaufman. I work at this hospital. So maybe you can tell me what's going on. That man who called himself Kaufman once again stirs in the chair he is sitting in. Page 2. I really can't say. I was taking a nap in the staff room. When I woke up, it was like this. Everyone seems to have disappeared. And it's snowing out. This time of year. Page 3, Dead monster on examination room floor. He looks off at the floor of the examination room. There, on the floor, the corpse of a still warm monster lay on its side. Page 4. Something's gone seriously wrong. Did you see those monsters? Have you ever seen such aberrations? Ever even heard of such things? You and I both know, creatures like that don't exist. Yeah. Page 5, examination room with Kaufman. And then I turned to face him as I realized something. Have you seen a little girl anywhere? I'm looking for my daughter. She's only 7. Short, black hair. Page 6. She's missing? I'm sorry. But with all those monsters around, I highly doubt that she's. Sorry, I didn't mean to alarm you. Your wife, she's here with you. Page 7. She died 4 years ago. Now it's just me and my daughter. I see. I'm sorry. Well, I'd better be going. I can't just sit around here doing nothing. So long. Good luck out there. Page 8, door of examination room. Bang. Onomatopoeia for door closing. The examination room door shuts powerlessly. Dr. Michael Kaufman. Oddly enough, I have completely memorized that name. Page 9. Huh. I suddenly notice that there is something on the floor that looks like a white scrap of paper. Page 10. What is this? I pick it up. Letters have been disorderly scribbled on it. Go after Kaufman. Page 1, black. I leave the examination room. Kaufman is nowhere to be found. I begin to run. Page 2. I pass through the medicine room and reach a planked floor corridor that silently extends in an L shape. I moved forward and found that there was an elevator with a large door at the end of the corridor. Page 1, black. I try pressing the buttons beside it. Nothing happens. It looks like the power is off. Page 2. There are several doors in the corridor. I begin opening each one in order. Page 3, meeting room. I open the door marked meeting room, head inside, and close the door behind me. A large table rests in the center of this room, and I notice that there is something glittering on top of it. Page 4, black. I grasp the light green key, leave the room, and once again step into the chilly corridor. Page 5, kitchen. The next room looks to be the kitchen. I guess that the food for patients is probably prepared here. Various bronze cooking utensils are neatly arranged in order on the stainless steel countertop. It does not appear that anything terribly important is here. Page 6. I carefully look through the various cooking utensils. Inside a large pot there is nothing at all. Page 7. While continuing to search to see if there might be some clue here or not, I notice that on the far wall various objects have been scattered about. Page 8. I carefully move forward on the wet floor as not to slip. Something is there. Page 1, kitchen. I reach out my hand towards the thing in front of me. Pick up the kitchen knife. Page 1, kitchen. I picked up a knife that appears to be for kitchen use. Perhaps this will come in handy for something. I only have a limited number of bullets. When the time comes I might be able to use this as a weapon. I left the kitchen. Page 1, black. I crept out into the corridor once more and stood in front of the door that was closest to the elevator. Page 2. I open the door, and the reverberations of the sounds of it opening and then closing shake my eardrums. The walls are made of concrete. And a few steps in a staircase leading to the basement extends like the folds inside the body of a snake. Page 3, stairs, animated. It is dark and difficult to see, but it looks like there is a door at the bottom of the staircase. Page 4. Be brave, I mutter to myself. Leaving only the echoes of my footsteps, I descend the staircase to hell one step at a time. And then I open the door leading to darkness. Page 5, black. A world without light. I could see that the electricity was most likely out in the entire hospital. I pressed the switch on the flashlight on my chest and tried lighting the area. Page 6, dark hospital floor. It is creepy, and yet there is nothing noticeably out of place. Chilly air drifts from the cold concrete, and it seems as if touching it would completely rob my body of its warmth. Page 7. While moving through the corridor I try opening the doors as I come to them. Of them, one opens with a creak. Page 8, generator room. Emergency generator is written on the machine that occupies most of the room. To reach the second floor and above it did not look like there was any method other than using the elevator. So without hesitation I turn the machine on. Page 9, black. I immediately head for the elevator. I press the up button. The heavy sound of the motor and the sounds of metal parts coming into contact with each other almost sound like intertwined screams. With a ding, the elevator stops and its doors slowly open. Page 10, Elevator Panel, 3 floor buttons. The inside of the elevator is large. It seems to be about big enough to accept 3 hospital beds. Buttons for each floor are lined up to the right of the elevator door. They are marked 3, 2, 1, and B from the top down. Page 11, black. First I head to the second floor. However, after I step off the elevator I find that the door connected to the corridor that leads to the rooms on this floor is locked. With no alternative I try heading to the third floor, but I find that it is in the same state. Page 12. Well, what now? I have already tried moving to every floor. With nothing else to do I re-entered the elevator and then could not believe my eyes. Page 13, Elevator Panel, 4 floor buttons. Of the buttons for each floor, 3 was definitely the highest floor just before. In spite of that, a new 4 button has been added. Page 1, black. The elevator doors open with a familiar sound and I step out onto the 4th floor. Again, I think. A condition extremely similar to that which I encountered after passing through the basement in the clock tower at the elementary school was present right in front of me. Page 2, Nightmare Hospital Corridor. Dark red rusted walls, metal grated floors. And a ringing in my ears that seems to creep up from the depths of hell is a menace to my mental state. Page 3. I open the door in front of me and a long corridor extends beyond it. I very carefully move forward while keeping my eyes fixed on the wall. Could Cheryl be here? The only way to find out is to search this place. Page 4. Page 5. I can hear something in the darkness in front of me. It sounds like the groan of something dragging on the ground. The owner of that groan is slowly closing in on me, but I cannot see what it is for sure with the faint light of my flashlight. Ready my gun. Page 1, Nightmare Hospital Corridor. It is probably not human. I firmly grip the gun, position my finger on the trigger, and begin to walk towards it with the gun ready beside my face. Page 2, Nurse appears. Eventually something white enters my field of vision. I adjust aim the flashlight on my chest with my hand and shine light on it. A white figure appeared, which is stooped over like an old woman. It looked to have undergone a grotesque change. Page 3, Puppet Nurse, animated. The monster has a very large hump on its back, which twitches and moves as if it were alive. In one hand it holds a knife, which it waves as it approaches me. Page 4. In the instant I readied my gun the monster began to run. By the time I realized this it slashed at me. I instantly dodged the attack, and thanks to that my clothes were slashed and I had only a scratch on my side. I suppose I was lucky. Page 5. Damn. I kick it in the face with the bottom of my shoe, and it falls down on its back. It then begins to stand for its next attack. Page 6. I close my left eye and steady my aim. Even after one shot hit its movement does not change at all. Page 7. I fire more bullets at it. It is laughing. In a voice great enough to shake the entire world it laughs as its face twists and distorts. Page 8, black. I cannot give up. When the final bullet loaded into my gun hits it finally stops laughing. This time it is face down and I begin crushing it with my foot. Finally, it completely stops moving. Page 1, black. This is insane. Another monster approaches from behind the corpse of the first one. At this rate all the bullets in the world would not be enough. Page 1, black. All I can do is run. Run past the monster behind me. Page 1, black. I turn around and begin to run towards the monster that was behind me. Evading the large swings of its knife I run down the dark corridor, occasionally stumbling. Page 1, stairs, animated. I am thinking about Cheryl. Even if she is held prisoner somewhere in this hospital there is no guarantee that I can rescue here. In fact, there is no reason that the staircase I am descending should lead me to Cheryl. Page 2. I begin to think that all of my current actions are all meaningless. Page 3. However, generally speaking, since I arrived in Silent Hill, no, since the day before leaving for Silent Hill, no, even longer ago, since the day I met Cheryl, perhaps I have had no choice in my actions, that they have been determined by the someone's will. Page 4. As I continue to the base of the stairs I contemplate, what if my life up to this point had just been on one track? Page 5. As I descend the stairs, my ears began ringing again. The ringing is so forceful that it cannot even be compared to before, and it forces me to squat down. What in the world has happened? Perhaps I have opened a door to hell, a door that should never be opened. Page 6. Something is clearly changing, and it is for the worse. Going back will not be permitted. I must move forward. Forward. I put my hands together on my head, and then squeeze my temples tightly by using my elbows. Page 7. The ringing then begins to sound like a demon is whispering in my ears, however, it doesn't stop. Page 8. I blindly begin to run. Even if I am to die in this Medland, I must save my beloved Cheryl first. Believing that the answers are beyond the door, I know that I must discover at least one clue. Page 9, Nightmare Hospital Corridor, flickering. Several overlapping square figures are shaking in time with the sound of my heart. It is the wall at the end of the area. Another wall lies perpendicular to it. There is a door present on this wall with a plate on it that says storehouse. Page 10. Some chemicals have been placed on the table that is next to the door. There are 3 beakers of different sizes in a test tube. The test tube contains a liquid that is of a different color to that which is in the leftmost beaker. I found a memo. Page 11. To create it you must come up with 1 deciliter of liquid and pour it into the test tube. No more or no less, that man had said. But there are no graduations on the beakers. This makes it impossible to come up with 1 deciliter using these 3 large beakers. Page 12. Explanation of controls. Use the D-pad to select a beaker that contains liquid and then confirm with the A button. Then choose the beaker that you wish to move the liquid to and press the A button to move the liquid. Page 13. Using the 10 deciliter, 7 deciliter, and 5 deciliter beakers you must create an amount of exactly 1 deciliter. The door won't budge an inch.